Have you ever wondered what it really means to be respected, or whether it is better to be loved or feared? Imagine living in a world where kindness is praised, but power belongs to those willing to bend the rules. This is the world Niccolò Machiavelli tried to understand, a world filled with ambition, betrayal, hope, and harsh reality. Born in Florence in 1469, Machiavelli grew up surrounded by political chaos, shifting alliances, and leaders who spoke about virtue while secretly chasing power. As a young man, he stepped directly into politics, believing he could help shape a stable future. But history had other plans. When the Medici family returned to power, he was accused, tortured, and thrown into exile. And in that lonely exile, stripped of his position and purpose, he began writing ideas that would shock the world forever. Picture him sitting alone, reflecting on everything he had seen: wars, deception, promises broken as easily as glass. He asked a simple but uncomfortable question: what actually works in leadership? Not what sounds noble, not what religion praises, but what keeps a nation alive. In his famous book, The Prince, Machiavelli argued that effectiveness often matters more than goodness. To many, his words sounded cold, even cruel. But maybe they were born from disappointment, from watching honest people lose while ruthless ones succeeded. He believed that leaders should understand human nature as it truly is, not as we wish it to be. People can be loyal one day and selfish the next. Love can fade. Fear, however, leaves a stronger imprint. That's why he wrote that while it would be ideal for a ruler to be both loved and feared, if forced to choose, it is safer to be feared. But don't mistake his ideas for simple villainy. Machiavelli wasn't just celebrating cruelty. He was observing a world that already seemed cruel. He saw how appearances could deceive, how kindness was sometimes used as a mask, and how leaders who clung only to moral ideals could be destroyed by those willing to play a darker game. And yet, there is something deeply tragic in this perspective. Imagine realizing that the values you were taught, honesty, humility, compassion, might not always protect you. Imagine feeling that survival itself demands compromise. His work challenges us because it asks a question we don't like to answer. Are we prepared for the world as it is, or only for the world we wish existed? Still, many thinkers after him warned against taking his ideas too literally. Writers like Dostoevsky showed how pure ambition can destroy a person from the inside, while philosophers like Immanuel Kant argued that morality should never be sacrificed for convenience. And maybe that's where the real power of Machiavelli lies, not as a guidebook for cruelty, but as a mirror reflecting humanity's darkest possibilities. When we read his words, we're forced to confront a choice. Will we become cynical, or will we learn to balance realism with compassion? Think about your own life for a moment. We may not be princes or rulers, but we all navigate relationships, workplaces, and social circles where power exists in subtle ways. Sometimes being endlessly nice leads to being overlooked or taken advantage of. Sometimes standing firm, even appearing harsh, becomes necessary to protect ourselves. Machiavelli reminds us that life is full of messy trade-offs. Being good doesn't mean being naive. Strength doesn't mean losing your humanity. And perhaps the real challenge is finding the balance between defending ourselves and still choosing kindness whenever possible. There's also another way to interpret his work, not as advice for rulers, but as a warning for everyone else. By understanding how manipulation works, we become less likely to fall victims to it. When he wrote that people are often easily deceived, it wasn't just an insult, it was a caution. Pay attention. Question appearances. Don't assume every smile is sincere. But at the same time, don't let the fear of deception turn you into someone who deceives others. Because once trust disappears completely, what kind of world remains? As Machiavelli's ideas spread across history, they inspired both admiration and outrage. Some leaders embraced his realism, while others rejected it as dangerous and immoral. Yet, ironically, the strong emotional reaction people have to his philosophy might reveal something hopeful about humanity. We don't want to live in a world ruled entirely by fear and manipulation. Deep down, most of us long for fairness, honesty, and genuine connection. Maybe that's why his work continues to provoke debate centuries later, because it sits right at the crossroads between who we are and who we want to be. Near the end of his life, Machiavelli never achieved the political power he once sought. He died in 1527, leaving behind ideas that would outlive empires. Some call him the father of modern political science. Others call him cynical or misunderstood. But perhaps the real lesson is not to blindly follow or reject him, but to reflect. Every generation faces its own version of the same dilemma. How do we stay true to our values in a complicated world? How do we protect ourselves without losing empathy? How do we lead without becoming the very thing we fear? So maybe the story of Machiavelli isn't just about politics. Maybe it's about all of us. Each day we make choices, small ones that shape the atmosphere around us, and bigger ones that define who we become. Power exists in every conversation, every decision, every moment when we choose courage over comfort or kindness over convenience. The world will always contain ambition, conflict, and uncertainty. But it also contains the possibility of growth. And perhaps the greatest takeaway from Machiavelli's legacy is this: understanding the darker side of humanity doesn't mean surrendering to it. It means seeing clearly and still deciding, consciously, to create something better. In the end, the question he leaves us with is deeply personal. Do we want to be feared, loved, or respected? Maybe true strength isn't choosing one extreme, but learning when to be firm and when to be compassionate. Maybe real leadership, whether over a nation or over our own lives, comes from facing reality without letting it harden our hearts. Because the future of humanity is not written by philosophers alone. It is written by every one of us, in every choice we make, every time we decide whether to build a world driven by fear, or a world guided by wisdom, courage, and hope. Before you go, I want you to pause for just a moment and reflect. Machiavelli's ideas are not comfortable. They challenge us. They push us to question what we believe about power, leadership, morality, and even ourselves. But that discomfort is important. Growth rarely comes from ideas that simply agree with us. It comes from wrestling with difficult truths and deciding consciously who we want to be in response to them. Maybe you agree with Machiavelli's realism. Maybe you strongly disagree. Or maybe you're somewhere in between, seeing value in strength, but still believing deeply in compassion. Wherever you stand, what matters most is that you think critically, that you stay curious, and that you continue questioning the world around you instead of accepting it blindly. If this video made you reflect, if it challenged your perspective, or if you simply enjoyed exploring these ideas, please take a moment to support the channel. Like the video so more people can discover these conversations. Subscribe to join a growing community that isn't afraid to dive into powerful, complex ideas about philosophy, history, and human nature. And share your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. Is it better to be feared or loved? Can power and morality truly coexist? Thank you for watching, for thinking deeply, and for being part of this journey. I'll see you in the next video.